SeaWorld is keeping a close eye on a killer whale blamed for killing a trainer.
In a heart-stopping moment at Blue Horizon, Neptune, the star orca, turns from performer to predator, attacking its trainer in front of a stunned audience. This shocking incident is just the tip of the iceberg. Across the globe, some few other orcas have broken script, turning trained routines into dangerous confrontations. Join us as we uncover 6 terrifying last moments of these orca trainers.
A trainer at SeaWorld Orlando rushed to the hospital after she was bitten by a killer whale.
Number 6. Neptune and Maris. Blue Horizon Oceanic Park, located in sunny San Diego, California, was a top destination for marine enthusiasts. It was very popular for its famous orca performances. The park featured state-of-the-art aquariums, dolphin encounters, and a colorful coral reef exhibit. But the true heart of the park was Neptune, a colossal 20 feet long, 10,000-pound male orca. His shows drew thousands of visitors each week, making him the park's biggest star and a key source of revenue. Neptune performed 6 amazing shows weekly, always leaving the audience impressed. However, behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. Trainers had been noticing disturbing behavior from Neptune. He would slap his tail against the walls of his tank and sometimes outright refuse to follow commands. Despite repeated warnings from the staff, Blue Horizon's management insisted that the shows continue, prioritizing the revenue Neptune generated over safety concerns. Among Neptune's handlers was Maris Ellington, a 27-year-old marine biologist who had worked tirelessly to become his primary trainer. Growing up along the rugged coastline of Oregon, Maris developed a deep passion for marine life. After earning her degree, she joined Blue Horizon. Maris was proud of her bond with Neptune, and so she brushed off concerns about his erratic behavior, confident she could handle him. But not everyone shared her optimism. A senior trainer had raised serious concerns months earlier, citing Neptune's growing aggression and isolation. The trainer even requested that Neptune be retired from performing or, at the very least, removed from shows. Management, however, rejected the request, unwilling to lose their star attraction. Frustrated and unwilling to compromise on safety, the trainer quit in protest. Their unprofessionalism, however, would eventually backfire. By the time of the afternoon show, Maris had already completed 1 performance earlier in the day. The amphitheater was once again filled with eager families and children, excited to watch Neptune. Despite Neptune's unpredictable behavior in recent months, Maris remained confident. She even reassured her colleagues, saying she believed he was in a good mood that day. Before the show began, the trainers reviewed the cues and safety protocols one final time. As the music swelled and the announcer welcomed the crowd, the energy in the amphitheater shifted. The audience of roughly 500 people cheered as Neptune entered the tank, his massive form gliding into the water. The show started smoothly. Under Maris's guidance, Neptune completed his opening routines flawlessly. The crowd erupted into applause as the orca did his display. For a brief while, it seemed like everything was back to normal. Neptune appeared to be his usual majestic self. Then came the finale, the centerpiece of the show, a synchronized swim between Maris and Neptune. Maris entered the water, and Neptune began circling her. Maris signaled for him to perform a breach alongside her, and for an instant, it looked like he was going to comply. But suddenly, Neptune veered off course. Without warning, he lunged at Maris, clamping his powerful jaws around her midsection. The force of the attack threw her body upward, and she briefly surfaced. Above the water, she could hear the horrified screams of the audience before Neptune yanked her back under. The trainers on the platform leapt into action, using distraction techniques to try to calm Neptune. They tossed brightly colored buoys and ropes into the tank, followed by a bucket of fish. Two trainers used long poles designed to gently nudge Neptune away, but his violent thrashing made it impossible to safely intervene. As Neptune slammed Maris against the tank walls, her lifeless body occasionally broke the surface, only to be dragged under again moments later. The audience watched in horror. Neptune finally let go of Maris after over a minute of violent thrashing, and her lifeless body rose to the surface. Rescue divers quickly entered the tank, pulling her to the deck, where medics desperately worked to save her. The injuries were devastating. Several fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and severe blunt force trauma to her chest and abdomen. Despite their efforts, Maris was pronounced dead at the scene. Chaos erupted in the aftermath. Guests were quickly evacuated from the park. Emergency personnel swarmed the area, and the amphitheater was cordoned off within hours. Blue Horizon responded by suspending all Orca shows, a move that later became permanent. The tragedy also had legal consequences for the park. Maris's grieving parents, devastated by the loss of their only child, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Blue Horizon. They accused the park of negligence, ignoring repeated warnings about Neptune's aggression and isolating him in conditions that heightened his stress. The lawsuit also pointed out inadequate safety measures and management's decision to continue performances despite known risks. After negotiations, the case was settled out of court. Blue Horizon's management agreed to a substantial settlement with Maris's family. As part of the settlement, Blue Horizon pledged to support marine conservation efforts and fund independent research into the mental health of captive orcas. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the marine park industry. Blue Horizon permanently banned orca shows, though it kept other attractions like dolphin encounters, aquariums, and conservation-focused exhibits. However, losing its star attraction led to declining attendance and mounting financial struggles. Within a few years, the park filed for bankruptcy and eventually closed its doors. Neptune was relocated to a marine sanctuary in British Columbia, where he could live in a more natural and less stressful environment. But Neptune isn't the only killer whale who was a victim of captivity, leading to irreversible tragedy. Number 5. Takcoa and Claudia. Loro Park is located along the stunning coastline of Puerto de la Cruz in Tenerife and is a globally recognized haven for wildlife. It's got over 100,000 square meters of lush greenery. The park is home to a diverse collection of species and attracts millions of visitors annually. It was initially established as a sanctuary for parrots, but it evolved into a world-class destination featuring dolphins, penguins, and its most famous residents, the orcas. Among the park's main attractions is the Orca Ocean exhibit, where these majestic marine mammals perform shows that showcase their strength, intelligence, and beauty. Yet, behind the glitz and glamour of these performances, things were quite not right. One of the park's stars was Tilikum's son, Takcoa, a 6-year-old male orca weighing over 3,300 pounds. Takcoa's impressive size and power made him a favorite among visitors, but for the trainers who worked closely with him, his story was far more complicated. Orcas, while intelligent and trainable, are still wild animals with instincts and emotions that can be difficult to predict. Takcoa had shown moments of aggression in the past, but these incidents were minor and never escalated to the point of major concern until one fateful day. Takcoa's early life was filled with disruptions. Shortly after his birth, he was separated from his mother, Taima, who always displayed aggression towards him. This behavior was thought to stem from her own traumatic past, including witnessing her mother, Gudrun, attempt to drown one of her calves. Takcoa was raised instead by a more experienced female orca, Kayla, and often paired with his half-brother, Tuar. In 2004, however, Takcoa and Tuar were transferred to SeaWorld San Antonio, where they joined a new group of orcas. This transition, along with his later move to Loro Park, only heightened the troubles Takcoa was facing. He endured frequent aggression from other orcas, leaving visible scars from countless confrontations. Despite these hardships, Takcoa grew into a powerful but unpredictable animal. shaped by his turbulent past, a past that likely contributed to his aggression toward his trainers. One of those trainers was Claudia Volhart, a 29-year-old marine biologist from Weinheim, Germany. Claudia had always been passionate about marine life and saw her work with orcas as a dream come true. As Europe's only female orca trainer at the time, she had spent years earning the trust of these incredible animals. On what seemed like an ordinary day, Claudia prepared for another training session with Takcoa. The atmosphere was tense, though she reassured her colleagues that Takcoa was okay anyway. The session was supposed to be simple. Takcoa would nudge her feet with his snout as they swam together. Claudia stood at the edge of the pool as Takcoa approached her, his dorsal fin cutting through the water. Initially, he appeared calm, but something about his movements seemed off. Without warning, Takcoa lunged at Claudia, striking her chest with incredible force. The impact knocked the air from her lungs and sent her crashing into the water. Before she could recover, Takcoa attacked again, his massive body slamming into her with unrelenting power. Claudia struggled to regain control, but Takkoa's strength was overwhelming. He dragged her downward into the deepest part of the pool, 40 feet below the surface. Takkoa's teeth grazed her arm as he pulled her further down. The pressure of the water made it harder for her to breathe, and the pain in her chest and arm was unbearable. As Takkoa's grip tightened, Claudia's vision began to fade. Just when it seemed like there was no escape, Takkoa released her and resurfaced, still holding her arm in his mouth. With one final surge of power, he propelled both of them back to the surface. Gasping for air, Claudia tried to stay conscious, but the pain was overwhelming. Her colleagues, who had been watching in horror, rushed to her aid. They pulled her from the water and away from Takkoa, who remained in the pool. Claudia's injuries were severe: a broken elbow, a bruised lung, and deep internal trauma. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked to stabilize her. Miraculously, she survived, but the attack left both physical and emotional scars that would take much longer to heal. Back at Loro Park, the reality of the incident began to sink in. Trainers and park management understood the risks of working with such powerful animals, but Takkoa's attack was proof of the unpredictable nature of orcas in captivity. Water-based training sessions with Takkoa were immediately suspended, and the park implemented new safety measures to protect trainers. For Claudia, recovery was a slow and challenging process. While her physical injuries gradually healed, the psychological impact of the attack lingered. And of course, people began to take on the issue. Critics argued that the stress and isolation these animals experience in artificial environments contribute to their aggressive behavior. Number 4. Alexis Martinez. Alexis Martinez, a 29-year-old trainer, had been working at a marine park in Tenerife, Spain, since 2004. Over the years, he had developed a strong connection with the animals he worked with, particularly the orcas. However, tragedy struck during a Christmas show rehearsal on December 24, 2009, when Alexis was attacked by Quito, a male killer whale. That day, Alexis was conducting a training session with Quito, preparing for the upcoming holiday performance. During this session, Quito initially surfaced with Alexis Martinez and appeared calm, giving the impression that things were under control. However, those observing noticed that Quito seemed to position himself between Martinez and the stage, as though blocking his access. Despite this unusual behavior, Martinez remained composed and waited for Quito to calm down further. He then requested a stage call, which involved an underwater tone signal. Quito responded to the tone as expected and swam toward the stage, where he was met by another trainer named Brian. Once Quito reached the stage, Brian directed Martinez to swim away from the area and head toward another designated spot in the pool. As Martinez began to swim away, using a sculling motion to move through the water, Quito's behavior changed. The orca started leaning toward Martinez in a subtle but suspicious manner. Sensing the situation might escalate, Brian attempted to regain control by giving Quito a hand target, a signal used to redirect the animal's focus. Unfortunately, Quito ignored the command and moved toward Martinez. What happened next was sudden and harsh. Quito used his rostrum, the front part of his head, to push Martinez to the bottom of the pool. The effect of the attack was brutal, as it was immediate. Martinez suffered multiple internal injuries, including severe trauma to his chest. Alexis died from these injuries, with the official cause of death listed as massive internal bleeding. The incident shocked those who knew Alexis and raised concerns about the risks trainers face when working with captive orcas. A SeaWorld employee later detailed the event in an incident report. According to the account, Quito had failed to perform several behaviors and respond correctly during the training. Of course, the park described Alexis Martinez's death as an accident and claimed that his body didn't show any signs of violence. The initial explanation from the park suggested that there was nothing unusual about the cause of death. However, after the autopsy was conducted, the true extent of the injuries became clear. The autopsy revealed that Martinez had suffered severe damage caused by the orca attack. He died from serious injuries that included multiple compression fractures. His bones had shattered under intense pressure. In addition to these fractures, the autopsy report also revealed that Martinez's vital organs had been torn. There were bite marks on his body, showing that the orca had physically bitten him during the incident. These findings painted a completely different picture from what the park initially claimed, in a bid to downplay the severity of the event and avoid public backlash. In total, there have been about 40 other reports from around the world of orcas being aggressive and responding negatively to being held captive. Number 3. Shuka. In July 2012, there was a troubling incident involving Shuka, a female orca who was on a breeding loan to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. She was originally from Marineland in France. During a show, Shuka suddenly lunged out of the water, and in doing so, she threw her trainer several feet forward. This unexpected and aggressive behavior caught everyone off guard. Shuka didn't stop there. She repeatedly lunged her trainer into the water. The whole incident was captured on video by an audience member who was watching the show, and the footage was very concerning. Many critics of marine parks have suggested that Shuka's behavior might have been caused by her lack of companionship. Before this incident, Shuka had a companion, a bottlenose dolphin named Merlin. However, Merlin was later moved to a different area of the park, leaving Shuka without a companion. Some animal experts and activists believe that the lack of a companion may have contributed to Shuka's frustration and aggression, as orcas are highly social animals and often form strong bonds with others. After this incident, Shuka was transferred to SeaWorld San Diego. Number 2. Annette, Ekis, and Shamu. On April 20th, 1971, Annette Ekis, a secretary at SeaWorld, was convinced to participate in a publicity stunt involving the park's main attraction, a 10-year-old female orca named Shamu. The stunt was part of an event designed to draw attention to the park in San Diego, California. Ekis was encouraged to ride on Shamu's back as a part of the show. Everything seemed fine at first, but as the ride was coming to an end, something went terribly wrong. Without warning, Shamu suddenly threw Ekis off her back. When she fell into the water, the orca grabbed hold of her leg and began pushing her through the pool. The situation became very dangerous, as Ekis was trapped in the orca's grip. Trainers who were watching from the side of the tank rushed to help. They attempted to pull Ekis out of the water, but Shamu wasn't letting go. The orca continued to hold onto her leg, making it difficult for anyone to rescue her. The trainers eventually had to use a pole to pry Shamu's jaws open in order to release Ekis. Once freed, she was quickly carried away on a stretcher. The injuries she sustained were serious, and she needed 25 stitches to close the wounds on her leg caused by the orca's bite. After the incident, Ekis decided to take legal action and they sued SeaWorld for the injury. However, despite the seriousness of the event, the court later overturned the monetary award she was granted on appeal, and she never got the compensation she had hoped for. Number 1. Peters and Casatka. On November 29, 2006, a serious and frightening incident took place at SeaWorld San Diego. Casatka, one of the park's 7 orcas, grabbed her trainer, Ken Peters, by the foot during an evening show at Shamu Stadium. The orca's grip was so strong that she dragged Peters to the bottom of the tank multiple times. The audience could do nothing but watch in shock as this situation unfolded before them. For about 9 minutes, Casatka kept Peters submerged in the water, refusing to let go. The trainer struggled to free himself, but Casatka's power made it difficult to escape. Finally, after what must have felt like an eternity, Casatka released Peters, and he was able to swim away and escape from her grasp. However, even after releasing him, Casatka didn't stop. She followed Peters as he tried to get away, and she proceeded to move over a netted barrier in an attempt to reach him again. This incident was not the first time Casatka had shown aggressive behavior toward Ken Peters. In fact, this was the second documented attack by Casatka on the same trainer. It became one of the most widely reported incidents at SeaWorld, and since then, Casatka has been known to be nearly as aggressive as Tilikum. Over the years, it has become obvious that captive animals in general pose a serious threat to humans, including trainers and staff. These animals are powerful and intelligent, however, their behavior can be unpredictable, especially when confined in unnatural environments. It all just comes down to one conclusion: the wild belong only in the wild.
When Ranchan went rogue. November 15th, 2006 started out like any other dazzling day at SeaWorld San Diego. The stadium was packed, the music was blasting, and the famous Shamu show was in full swing. Trainers were doing their thing, killer whales were leaping, and the crowd was loving every second. But then, things took a wild turn, fast. In the middle of the performance, a massive orca named Ranchan pulled off a stunt no one saw coming. Right there, in front of hundreds of stunned visitors, he grabbed his trainer, Ryu, and yanked him into the water. Not gently. This wasn't part of the act. The gasps from the crowd said it all. This was serious. At first, it looked like a terrifying freefall into the unknown, but Ryu, calm under pressure, kicked into survival mode. His years of training weren't just for show now, they were keeping him alive. As Ranchan darted toward the far end of the pool, something changed. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was trust, but Ryu managed to break free just in time. He burst to the surface, gasping for breath but still in one piece. The crowd exhaled with him. The bond between trainer and whale had always seemed magical, but that day, it got real. Ryu realized that the connection they shared was powerful, but unpredictable. Orcas aren't programmed performers. They're wild, emotional, and sometimes explosive. From that moment on, their relationship was built not just on trust, but a deep respect for the raw, untamed strength that lived behind Ranchan's playful flips and splashes. It was a chilling reminder that no matter how rehearsed a show might be, nature doesn't always follow the script. Now here is truly a moment no one expected. At the grand opening of Ocean Dragon Orca Spectacle in China, foreign trainers smiled, excited to begin. The orca swam calmly at first, but it wasn't adapting. New faces, strange waters, then it attacked. Screams followed. A peaceful show turned into pure chaos. Did the orca try to send a message? What do you think? Share in the comments below. The day Shamu snapped. Things were way too quiet at SeaWorld Adventure Park that day, a weird kind of still. Shamu, the park's superstar killer whale, was gliding around his giant pool like he had nothing but peaceful vibes. The crowd had no clue that the real adventure was just about to start. The stands were packed. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, ready for the famous Shamu adventure show. Then, trainer Steve Ibel made a bold move. He trusted his bond with Shamu and stepped into the water. Big mistake. At first, it looked like a normal routine. But then, out of nowhere, Shamu switched gears. The calm whale turned into a wrecking ball of fins and fury. Before anyone could react, he started slamming his massive body into Steve again and again. The audience gasped. Panic took over. This wasn't a show anymore, it was chaos. Other trainers rushed in, waving and shouting, trying to distract Shamu. Minutes dragged on like hours. Steve was tossed, dragged, and battered in what can only be described as an underwater beatdown. But somehow, despite being completely shaken, Steve managed to calm the giant down and end the attack. After the dust settled, the park was buzzing, but not with excitement. Whispers filled the air. The magic of the Shamu adventure had taken a dark turn, and nothing felt the same anymore. Still shaken, Steve made a quiet promise to himself. He'd return to the water, not just for the job, but to figure out why Shamu turned on him. Was it stress? Was it confusion? One thing was clear. This whale had a lot more going on beneath the surface than anyone realized. And just like that, one of the most famous killer whales in the world reminded everyone why killer is part of the name. Casatka's terrifying turn. It all went down in SeaWorld San Diego's massive tank back in 2006. One moment, Casatka the killer whale was gliding along like the star of the show, cool and calm. The next, she turned full predator, and her trainer, Ken Peters, was caught right in the middle of it. In the now infamous footage, Ken is working through a routine when Casatka suddenly grabs hold of his foot. Not gently. We're talking about a full clampdown with jaws that could crush bone. Ken tries to break free, but Casatka isn't letting go. She drags him deep into the water like it's part of the act, but this isn't rehearsed. It's deadly real. He finally surfaces, gasping for breath, but the nightmare isn't over. Casatka goes right back for him, pulling him under again. She's not playing around. At one point, she even rams into the barrier net with full force, making it clear she wasn't done. This wasn't a glitch in the show. It was a chilling reminder that these are apex predators. Huge, powerful, and unpredictable. That day, the glossy theme park image cracked wide open. Behind the music and trained routines were instincts no tank could contain. Ken somehow survived, but the incident became a landmark moment. It raised serious questions about captivity, training methods, and whether humans truly understand the creatures they perform with. The ruling against SeaWorld that followed wasn't just about regulations, it was a reality check. No amount of training can fully tame the wild, and no amount of choreography can erase the truth behind those deep, intelligent eyes. Casatka reminded everyone that killer whales aren't props. They're not circus acts. They're powerful animals with minds of their own, and sometimes they decide to stop playing nice. Q's Curious Clash. Back in 2007 at Nagoya Aquarium, things were going swimmingly until they weren't. The crowd was loving every second as Ku, the star orca, playfully swam circles around his trainer. With a microphone in hand, the trainer delivered his usual upbeat commentary, completely unaware that Ku had his eyes locked on something much more interesting than the crowd. Turns out Ku wasn't focused on applause or fishy treats. He was absolutely fascinated by that shiny little microphone. While the trainer chatted, Ku stared it down like it was some kind of alien gadget. Then, right at the peak of the show, Ku made his move. With a sudden surge of energy, he lunged straight for the microphone. The entire place froze. The audience gasped. This wasn't part of the script. It wasn't a trick or a special effect. This was nature hitting pause on the performance and reminding everyone that, deep down, wild instincts never really go away. The trainer, to his credit, stayed cool as ice. He calmly held the mic away and whispered soothing words, trying to bring Ku back from the edge, and slowly, the tension dissolved. The moment passed. No one got hurt. But everyone left that day with a fresh dose of respect, because while Ku might have been raised in captivity and trained to do flips and bows, he wasn't a puppet. He was still a massive, intelligent predator with a wild heart and a curious mind. From then on, the bond between Ku and his trainer was different. Stronger, sure, but more cautious too. There was mutual trust, but also a deeper understanding. Training and routines can only go so far. Ku reminded everyone that even in a show full of lights and music, the wild is never truly tamed. 2 inches from terror. At Marineland, what started as a regular day turned into a moment no one would ever forget. Among the visitors was a curious child, full of wonder and unaware of just how close danger really was. Peering into the massive orca tank, the little one leaned in, face nearly pressed against the glass. On the other side, a giant orca, and it had noticed. Drawn by the child's small size and slow movement, the killer whale glided silently toward the glass, its massive body cutting through the water like a submarine with teeth. As it got closer, the crowd's chatter faded into silence. Everyone could see the orca's mouth slowly open, those razor-sharp teeth fully on display. 2 inches. That's all that stood between the child and those powerful jaws. The tension was unreal. The child stared straight into the orca's dark eyes, which reflected something chilling: intelligence, curiosity, and a raw, primal instinct. Gasps echoed through the building as people held their breath. For a few heart-stopping seconds, time practically froze. Then just like that, the orca turned and swam away. No glass cracked, no harm done. But the moment left everyone shaken and in awe. That thick wall of acrylic had been the silent hero of the day, protecting the child from a potentially devastating encounter. The story spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a scare, it became a legendary tale about the razor-thin line between safety and nature's power. One moment, you're smiling at a beautiful creature. The next, you're staring into the wild. For that child, it was more than just a close call. It was a life-altering brush with the untamed, a haunting reminder of what lies just beneath the surface, a powerful dance between life and danger, separated by just 2 inches of glass. The dark side of breeding killer whales at SeaWorld. So, did you know SeaWorld's killer whale breeding system is, well, pretty messed up? Since capturing wild whales became illegal in 1972, they've had to get creative to keep their whale population up. Enter artificial insemination. Here's how it works. Trainers actually train male killer whales to flip onto their backs and present, well, their private parts. Then, the trainer manually extracts the semen and catches it in a container. After that, the semen gets inserted into a female whale in hopes of making her pregnant. Sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, right? But that's not even the worst part. SeaWorld inseminates female whales way too young, sometimes as young as 8 years old. To put that in perspective, killer whale females are physically ready for pregnancy between 14 and 16 years old. In the wild, they don't usually have babies until then, but SeaWorld pushes them to breed early, and this often leads to stillbirths. In fact, almost all killer whale births at SeaWorld end in stillbirths. And the trauma doesn't stop there. Once the baby killer whale is born, it's often separated from its mother far too soon. This is beyond heartbreaking for the whales, who are one of the most emotionally advanced species on the planet.
And... oh, it's reaching.
These whales experience emotions like empathy and sadness far more deeply than we can imagine, and the separation leaves them crying and suffering from depression. It's a brutal reality behind the scenes at SeaWorld. The Loro Park tragedy. Here's where things went from careless to catastrophic. Back in 2009, SeaWorld decided to share the wealth, literally, by sending 4 of their killer whales overseas to Spain's Loro Park. The idea was simple: expand the brand, draw crowds, and make money. But here's what they didn't do: properly train the staff who would be handling those massive animals. Enter Alexis Martinez. He was just 29 years old and had 0 experience working with whales as unpredictable as these. And yet, there he was, on Christmas Eve, trying to train orcas he barely knew, ones that didn't trust him, and frankly, had no reason to. One of those whales was Hugo, a powerful male and one of the mothers in the group. During a routine training session, things took a deadly turn. Hugo suddenly grabbed Alexis and dragged him underwater. Now, in some cases, an orca might pull a trainer down and then let go. Not this time. This time, the whales didn't stop. According to reports, Hugo rammed into Alexis's chest with such brutal force that his ribcage collapsed. Think about that. His chest was caved in by sheer impact. To make matters worse, bite marks were later found on his body. This wasn't just an accident, it was an attack. What makes this even more tragic is how preventable it was. SeaWorld had sent their whales across the ocean, but didn't send the proper training or warnings with them. The staff at Loro Park were left to figure things out as they went, and someone paid the ultimate price for it. Alexis's death wasn't just a terrible accident. It was a failure of planning, a failure of safety, and a brutal reminder of what can happen when profit gets prioritized over preparation. Christmas is supposed to be a time of joy, but for Loro Park in 2009, it turned into a holiday tragedy no one would forget. Tilikum's tragic legacy. By this point, Tilikum had already been linked to 2 deadly incidents, but SeaWorld wasn't ready to let go of its star attraction. Instead of acting on the red flags, they did damage control. How? By calling the deaths accidents and downplaying the orca's behavior. Trainers were told Tilikum was safe, that everything was under control. But the truth? It was only a matter of time. Fast forward to February 24, 2010. It was just another show day at SeaWorld Orlando. The stadium was packed, and Dawn Brancheau, a senior trainer with years of experience, was preparing for a routine performance with Tilikum. Everything started smoothly. Tilikum responded to commands, did the usual tricks, and even accepted a few head pats and treats. From the outside, it looked like just another polished show. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Without warning, Tilikum latched onto Dawn's ponytail and yanked her into the water with brutal force. What followed was absolutely horrifying. The 6-ton whale thrashed her around like a rag doll, refusing to let go. He dragged her deeper and deeper into the tank, far beyond anyone's reach. It was clear this wasn't play. It was rage, frustration, and years of trauma erupting all at once. Despite the desperate attempts from staff, there was nothing they could do. Dawn drowned in front of stunned guests and co-workers. It was the 3rd life lost to Tilikum, and it was captured on video. But here's the cruel twist. The whale wasn't the villain. Tilikum had spent years in cramped tanks, bullied by other whales, denied the open ocean his instincts craved. He had grown to be more than twice the size of an average orca, yet he was treated just like the others, trapped and pushed to perform. SeaWorld had known about his past, but instead of protecting their staff, they kept up the illusion of control.
What, you smart?
This tragic event forced the world to finally confront the dark truth behind the spectacle. Trainers weren't just at risk, they were never properly warned. Now, let's explore some facts that SeaWorld doesn't want you to know. These truths explain why orcas attacked their trainers in the first place. Tilikum's dark past and the first fatal incident. Let's rewind to where it all began. If SeaWorld mishaps were characters in Jurassic Park, then Tilikum, the orca at the center of it all, was the full-blown T-Rex. No exaggeration. Tilikum's story started in a small Canadian theme park called Sealand of the Pacific. Back then, he was just a young calf. But life wasn't exactly sunshine and sardines. The older orcas bullied him constantly. That harsh treatment didn't just hurt, it shaped him. Over time, it made him angry, unpredictable, and dangerous. Then came the tragic moment that would change everything. During one routine day in 1991, Kelty Byrne, a 21-year-old trainer, slipped into the orca tank by accident. She wasn't supposed to be there. Tilikum was. What happened next stunned the crowd into silence. Witnesses say he grabbed her leg and pulled her underwater. Again and again and again. She screamed for help, but there was nothing anyone could do. The audience, frozen in horror, watched helplessly as the situation spiraled. It was a nightmare in real life, and it happened in front of hundreds. The incident was catastrophic for the park. A young trainer lost her life, and Sealand's reputation shattered overnight. Within a year, the park shut its doors for good. But here's where things got worse. Instead of releasing Tilikum back into the wild, they sold him to SeaWorld Orlando. A fresh start? Not quite. SeaWorld staff had no idea just how dangerous he could be. No one told them about his history, his aggression, his past, and that decision? It led to more tragedy years later in 1999 when Tilikum, now grown into a massive bull orca, was involved in another fatal incident. Tilikum wasn't just misunderstood, he was mishandled, and the consequences would ripple through SeaWorld for years to come. When routine turns ruthless. It all started in a dimly lit aquarium, where every day felt like a loop on repeat. The same tricks, the same whistles, the same tiny pool, and in the middle of it all, a killer whale with a brain as sharp as a tack and the patience of, well, a wild animal stuck in a tank. Day after day, the monotony built up. You could almost see the stress swirling in the whale's eyes. This wasn't some playful dolphin flipping for fish. This was a ticking time bomb in a 10,000-gallon prison. Then, boom! The whale snapped. With terrifying force, it launched out of the water like a missile. Barriers shattered. That line between trainer and wild beast, gone in one leap. The audience, frozen. The staff, panicked. The whale, unstoppable. Chaos hit like a tidal wave. The orca, weighing in at a jaw-dropping 3.5 tons, lunged not once, but twice. Its body slammed into the trainer with bone-crushing power. You could almost feel the air get sucked out of the room. The footage didn't just go viral, it went nuclear. People couldn't believe what they were watching. On one hand, it was a heart-stopping scene. On the other, a brutal wake-up call. The trainer's life was hanging by a thread while the rest of the world was glued to screens, debating who was really to blame. The ocean trembled, and so did the public's opinion. That video still haunts people to this day. A giant whale trapped in a tiny world, finally saying, enough. It wasn't just a tragic moment, it was a message carved into our collective memory. Nature doesn't do well in cages, and when it snaps back, it doesn't care about contracts, shows, or stadium seats. The cost of captivity? Too high. Let's just say if freedom had a weight, it'd be around 3.5 tons. The kidnapping of killer whales for SeaWorld. Let's talk about a real-life whale heist. Back in 1970, despite the ban on capturing killer whales, SeaWorld got its hands on 5 wild whales. How? Well, it all started with a team of boats and airplanes on the hunt in the Puget Sound. Their goal? To capture killer whale calves for the entertainment industry. The plan was simple. Herd the whales into a cove where they could trap them. But the whales weren't going down without a fight. These intelligent creatures knew exactly what was happening. They'd been through it before and communicated among themselves. So the males swam into the cove to lead the humans on, while the females and their calves snuck off in another direction. But the humans had an upper hand. The airplane was able to communicate with the boats and tell them to change course, catching many whales that day and separating them from their families. It was a heartbreaking operation, and many young whales were taken from their parents. When the US banned the practice, SeaWorld didn't stop. They just moved on to new territories like Iceland, where capture wasn't outlawed yet. And they kept scooping up more whales for display, even after their own country said it was wrong. Hugo, a tragic end. We've covered close calls, deadly attacks, and shocking escapes, but this one might just be the saddest story of them all. Meet Hugo. He was a young orca when he was snatched from the wild and dropped into the concrete tank of the Miami Seaquarium. From the beginning, life in captivity didn't sit right with him. Separated from his family and bullied by other whales, he quickly developed violent, unpredictable behavior. And not just the occasional tantrum, Hugo made headlines for it. One Seaquarium official once admitted that Hugo seemed to make intentional attempts to hurt his trainers. Think about that. Even those in charge knew he wasn't just being rowdy, he was suffering. There were several scary moments, but one stands out. During a stunt where the trainer had to place his head inside Hugo's mouth, things went very wrong. Hugo bit down, hard. The trainer walked away with deep teeth marks in his cheeks and had to get 7 stitches. That wasn't an accident. That was a desperate animal pushed past his limits. And sadly, the worst harm Hugo ever caused wasn't to his trainers, it was to himself. He developed a disturbing habit, ramming his head against the walls of his tank, again and again. It was clear this wasn't just aggression, it was pain, trauma, and maybe a cry for help. Then, one day, it all came to an end. Hugo slammed his head so hard he caused a brain aneurysm. It killed him instantly. The whale died not in the ocean, not surrounded by his kind, but in a cramped tank, alone and broken. This wasn't just the cost of captivity, it was a full-blown tragedy. And Hugo's story still lingers as a reminder that even the biggest creatures can be the most helpless. The truth behind collapsed dorsal fins at SeaWorld. Ever notice how some of SeaWorld's killer whales have their dorsal fins all flopped over to one side? That's not something you usually see in the wild, right? So what's going on here? In the wild, a male killer whale's dorsal fin can grow up to 6 feet tall. It's a big deal for navigating the oceans. But when these whales are kept in captivity, their fins often flop down. SeaWorld claims this is totally natural, and it happens in the wild too. But not quite. Studies have shown that in the wild, a collapsed fin is usually a sign of poor health or some kind of trauma. Here's why. The dorsal fin is made of collagen, kind of like our ears. In the wild, the pressure of swimming fast and diving deep helps keep it upright. But when these whales are just swimming in a pool, the pressure isn't the same, and that can cause serious damage to the fin. And guess what? This mostly happens to male whales for some reason. Here's the kicker. When these whales are released back into the wild, their fins stand tall again. So, the problem seems to be all about the stress of captivity and lack of space to move around. And before we move on, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Or, well, you'll have a surprise centipede encounter tonight. You've been warned. The show that took a wild turn. Crowds packed into the stadium, buzzing with excitement. The music started, trainers gave the cue, and out came the star of the show, a majestic killer whale gliding through the water like a ballerina in a black and white wetsuit. Everything was perfect. The crowd was hooked, clapping and cheering as the whale showed off its graceful flips and tail waves. But then, just when everyone thought they'd seen it all, the whale pulled a move no one saw coming. With one big dive, it disappeared below the surface. The crowd gasped. A moment of silence hung in the air. Then, wham! That tail slammed the water like a hammer, over and over. Suddenly, waves started crashing over the pool's edge, drenching the front rows. The exits blocked by a wild wall of water. What started as a show quickly turned into chaos. People jumped from their seats. Some screamed. Others tried to film while sprinting. It was part water park, part stampede. Security scrambled, trainers shouted, and through it all, the whale kept thrashing, completely unbothered. Eventually, the panic settled. The crowd slowly cleared out, soaked and stunned. But something had changed. That magical performance had taken a sharp turn, and it left a serious mark. The audience had come to be entertained. They left with a new respect. That killer whale wasn't just a performer. It was a powerful, wild force of nature. Turns out, beauty and danger can swim in the same tank. The night Tilikum struck again. Silent. The first attack happened in front of a full house. But this one, it unfolded in total silence under the cover of darkness. And that's what makes it so chilling. On the morning of July 7th, 1999, SeaWorld Orlando trainers showed up for a normal day. What they found instead was something straight out of a horror movie, a lifeless body floating in Tilikum's tank. No alarms had gone off, no one had seen a thing, and at first, staff couldn't even tell if the body was male or female, it was that badly damaged. As the investigation unfolded, the story only got more bizarre. The victim was eventually identified as Daniel Dukes, a 27-year-old homeless man. Somehow, he'd snuck into SeaWorld the night before and made his way into the restricted Orca area. And for reasons no one fully understands, he jumped into the wrong pool, the one holding Tilikum. There was no video footage ever released, and no one knows exactly what happened in those final moments. But the autopsy report filled in some of the blanks. Tilikum didn't just attack. He dragged Dukes around the tank again and again, leaving behind devastating injuries. It was a silent tragedy that shook SeaWorld to its core. One night, one wrong step, and the park was once again in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Unlike the previous incident, there were no screams, no audience, no warning, just a man, a misunderstood whale, and a deadly encounter that no one saw coming. Tilikum was clearly not just acting out. He was a product of years of frustration, confinement, and psychological trauma. And this event marked the second time his fury turned fatal. It was another stark reminder. Even the quietest moments in captivity can turn deadly. The unhealthy diet and drug cocktail of captive killer whales. Killer whales in the wild eat a pretty fancy menu: fish, penguins, seals, sea lions, and even other whales. With their massive size, up to 6 tons and 32 feet long, it's no wonder they need a top-notch diet to stay healthy and strong. But at SeaWorld? Not so much. Instead of fresh, nutrient-packed meals, these whales are often fed dead fish, which is far from the healthy, varied diet they would get in the wild. And that's just the beginning. To keep these whales docile, SeaWorld mixes in a cocktail of drugs, including benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and sometimes even contraceptives. Why? Well, captive whales can become aggressive or even show signs of mental illness, just like humans do when they're kept in stressful conditions. Now you might be wondering, aren't drugs like these a last resort? You'd be right, they usually are. But that doesn't mean they're harmless. These medications can have serious side effects on the whale's health, and any small changes in behavior they cause aren't helping in the long run. In fact, it's just masking the real issues that come with keeping these magnificent creatures in captivity. So, not only are they getting a poor diet, but they're also being drugged just to get by. Yikes. The truth about SeaWorld trainers. At SeaWorld, trainers are often shown as expert marine biologists who know everything about killer whales. But that's not always the case. While some trainers may have extensive training, most of them are actually performers who've learned how to work with the animals for the shows. They might not have the deep scientific knowledge you'd expect from true experts in marine biology. Now, that's not to say these trainers aren't competent. They definitely know how to interact with the animals in a way that's safe for both them and the whales. But the truth is, no trainer can ever predict how a killer whale is going to act or react. It's kind of like trying to read the mood of a giant, powerful animal that's had its own life experiences. Things can go wrong in a split second. One of the most experienced trainers in SeaWorld's history, John Hargrove, became a vocal critic of the park. After years of working with killer whales, he realized that, as much as he had magical experiences with them, these animals belong in their natural environment. Hargrove admitted that there were times when he felt his life was in danger because of sudden mood changes in the whales. It's a reminder. No matter how much training a person has in the water, the killer whale is always the one in charge. Animal care at SeaWorld. SeaWorld loves to say their animals are treated like royalty, but the reality paints a very different picture. In fact, after a child was bitten by a dolphin at SeaWorld San Diego, the U.S. Department of Agriculture stepped in to investigate. And what they found wasn't exactly a glowing review. The USDA, the government agency in charge of making sure animals are treated properly, uncovered multiple violations of the Animal Welfare Act. We're not just talking about minor slip-ups. Some were downright dangerous. For starters, surgical tools being used on animals were over 10 years past their expiration date. Yes, 10 years. That's not just careless, it's alarming. And the dolphin tanks? Cracked walls, rusty beams, and crumbling concrete. It wasn't just unsafe for the dolphins, it was a hazard for the staff too. Add in the fact that young kids were being allowed to hand-feed the dolphins, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Dolphins in captivity can become frustrated and even aggressive, and several injuries have backed that up. SeaWorld has also had animals suffer injuries and even die from accidents that could have been prevented with proper care. One of their killer whales, Katina, was reported injured just weeks before a public statement claimed everything was fine. Despite all the glossy PR and happy music during shows, the behind-the-scenes reality tells a much darker story. And there you have it, the shocking truth behind the orca attacks and the grim reality of life at SeaWorld. These powerful creatures aren't just performing for our entertainment, they're suffering in silence. It's time we all take a closer look at what's happening behind the splash. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Stay informed, and let's continue exposing the untold stories that need to be heard.